If a diamond ring is meant to symbolize eternal love, then why does it shine brightest on the finger of the woman who replaced you? What if losing everything was the only way to truly win? The ballroom at the Maris Hotel shimmered under a canopy of crystal chandeliers. Waiters in crisp uniforms floated between the gold-draped tables, balancing trays laden with champagne and caviar. In every corner, Manhattan's elite whispered secrets and scandals behind manicured hands. But tonight, the real show wasn't on the stage. Julian's arm was wrapped around Belle Chase. The ring, a monstrous glittering diamond that looked heavy enough to bruise, caught every camera flash in the room. It was about sending a message. Belle beamed, leaning in as Julian turned to the cameras. Isn't that what life is about? He didn't say her name. They knew that just a year ago, Julian had stood at this same gala with another woman at his side. The air was thick with judgment and curiosity. What most didn't know was that on the other side of town, a very different scene was playing out. At Teterboro Private Airport, soft yellow lights glowed along the runway, painting the sleek curve of a midnight blue jet. For years, she had played her part as Mrs. Julian Vaughn, smiling at galas, keeping up appearances, always silent when her husband's ambition cut a little too deep. But tonight, she wore no diamonds, no designer gown. A phone buzzed on the table beside her. Evelyn glanced at it, recognizing her best friend's number. They're saying it's 3 million. Are you okay? Please tell me you didn't see this. I'm more than okay. Don't worry about me. Tell me when they start the silent auction. There was a time when news like this would have broken her. She remembered last year's gala too well. Evelyn had felt the world's eyes on her, waiting for a reaction. But tonight was different. There was only Evelyn, her suitcase, and the sound of engines starting outside. She stood, smoothing her dress, and glanced at her reflection in the glass. There were faint shadows under her eyes, but her gaze was clear. He was older, broad-shouldered, with silver hair swept back, and a jaw set like stone. This was Alexander Pierce, a name whispered in Forbes articles and Wall Street boardrooms. "Are you ready, Evelyn?" he asked, his voice warm and steady. She nodded. "I am. Thank you for coming all the way out here. Paris by morning if you want. Anywhere but here." Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. Evelyn and Alexander walked together toward the waiting jet. One last message from her friend. "He thanked you." Evelyn stared at the screen, then typed back with a wry smile. "But he has no idea what I made of myself." Behind her, the city's brightest ballroom was caught up in Julian's parade. Cameras flashed, laughter rang out, bells sparkled, but no one noticed the quiet departure at the airport. No one saw the elegant woman stepping onto a jet without looking back. No one saw the billionaire at her side, the way he looked at her with respect, not possession. Tonight, Julian Vaughn could have his headlines, his diamonds, his hollow victory. Evelyn Blake was airborne, far above it all, with a future brighter than any ring. And for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring. She was soft-spoken, always dressed just a shade too simply for the circles she moved in. Evelyn was born Evelyn Harper in a tiny town outside Des Moines, Iowa. Her father was a mechanic, her mother a part-time school secretary. They lived in a faded yellow house at the edge of town, a place where dreams felt small and the horizon always looked so far away. Evelyn's mother taught her to read before kindergarten and filled her world with stories of places she'd never seen. It was on that swing Evelyn made a silent vow. By 16, Evelyn was valedictorian and working weekends at the local diner, squirreling away every tip. College was her ticket out. The city overwhelmed her, but she forced herself to keep up. Her favorite spot was the university library where she could dream without feeling small. It was during her senior year that she met Julian Vaughn. He was tall, magnetic, the son of a real estate magnate. He swaggered into her life like a storm, all confidence and expensive cologne. Julian noticed Evelyn at a campus mixer, drawn by her quick wit and the way she listened more than she spoke. The guest list was packed with names Evelyn recognized from magazine covers. "My wife is so smart. She's from Iowa." At every event, she was the breath of fresh air among heiresses and models. But as months passed, Evelyn felt herself shrinking inside the golden cage. Julian liked his women elegant but silent, sharp but never threatening. Whenever she spoke her mind about business, about art, about his company, he'd smile, squeeze her hand a little too tight and change the subject. He'd mock her for crying at old movies, belittle her for acting like a small-town girl. She learned to apologize even when she hadn't done anything wrong. She learned to smooth over his tantrums and accept that her value was tied to how well she fit the role he'd written for her. Evelyn threw herself into charity work, first as a volunteer, later as the silent backbone behind Julian's philanthropic image. She thought if she just tried hard enough, she could make him happy, make him see her for who she really was. The gala was in full swing. Julian was laughing too loudly, glass of scotch in hand, whispering with a woman Evelyn didn't recognize. When Evelyn confronted him later, he sneered, "Don't embarrass yourself." She realized nothing would ever change. She used the skills she honed in Julian's shadow, turning his lessons and manipulation into her armor. So, when the divorce came, public, ugly, splashed across tabloids, Evelyn played her part. She let the lawyers do the talking. She let Julian bask in the attention of his new fiancée. She let the world whisper that she'd be lost without him. As the jet taxied toward the runway, Alexander Pierce sat across from her, watching with a mix of curiosity and admiration. He knew bits of her past, but he was most interested in her future. Or a woman who finally realizes she never needed anyone's permission to be happy. Outside, the city shrank beneath them, the lights blurring into a golden gray. Inside the jet, Evelyn closed her eyes, let out a breath, and felt for the first time in years, absolutely free. The city that never sleeps sparkled with a million pinpricks of light. Each one a story unfolding behind penthouse windows and velvet ropes. One awash in golden excess, the other soaring above it all, leaving behind the noise of broken dreams. Back at the Maris Hotel, Julian Vaughn basked in the afterglow of attention, his hand never leaving Belle's waist. Around him, the world was a blur of expensive perfume, laughter like wind chimes, and the constant, subtle flash of camera phones. This was Julian's element, a stage he'd built brick by brick, dollar by dollar, fueled by a hunger to prove himself. It was a massive ice sculpture in the shape of the charity's logo. He tapped his glass for attention. "Thank you for being here tonight. This city has given me everything. I want to share that blessing, not just with the cause we all support, but with the woman who's made me believe in happiness again." His eyes lingered on Belle, and she flashed the ring for the crowd, drawing gasps and applause. In the back, a small group of women exchanged looks. Some were envious, others skeptical. A few recognized the pattern, how quick Julian had moved on, how much louder he laughed when Evelyn was gone. But the moment swept on. The orchestra struck up a waltz. And Julian, arm in arm with Belle, danced beneath the spotlights as if the world had never turned on its axis. Above them, high above the towers of steel and glass, Evelyn's world was changing by the second. Inside Alexander Pierce's private jet, everything was hushed and serene. Evelyn sat by the window, watching the city shrink, the skyline dissolving into mist as they banked toward the Atlantic. To new beginnings, Alexander toasted. Evelyn raised her glass, the cool crystal trembling ever so slightly in her grip. Here was a woman once written off as collateral damage. Alexander wasn't just a billionaire in the tabloid sense. Not a bit. Evelyn watched the clouds swirl outside, her mind drifting to the life she'd left behind. She thought of the years spent tiptoeing around Julian's moods, the hours wasted on apologies, the effort she poured into making their home a sanctuary, only to have it shattered by ambition and ego. "I'm not running. The world could say what it wanted. Julian and Belle posed for a round of photographs, every angle calculated for maximum impact. He felt invincible, untouchable, the king of his own glittering court. But for all the eyes on him, for all the hands shaking his, a flicker of insecurity passed across Julian's face when the music paused and someone mentioned Evelyn's absence. "Where is she tonight?" an investor's wife whispered just loud enough for Julian to hear. "I always liked her, you know. We both have. She's probably on a yoga retreat or something. It's for the best." The lie tasted bitter. No matter how loud the room got, Julian sometimes caught himself searching for her laughter, her calming presence, the one thing he'd never been able to buy or control. Miles above, Evelyn reclined in her seat, exhaustion washing over her as the city disappeared behind her. She'd spent years trapped in a life built on pretense. The pain of betrayal, the weight of expectation, even the sting of public humiliation, all of it was fading with the lights of Manhattan. She looked at Alexander, a silent question in her eyes. "Then maybe we're both exactly where we're supposed to be." But the real story, the one that would be whispered in boardrooms and beauty salons for years, wasn't about the size of Belle's diamond or the man who bought it. Every fairy tale needs a villain, but in Manhattan, the lines are rarely so clear. If you asked him, he wasn't the villain. But those who watched closely, who heard the rumors behind the curtain, knew better. Julian was not just a man who moved on. He was a man who needed to win at any cost. Tonight at the Maris Hotel, Julian basked in the spotlight. She was the face of Julian's upgrade, younger, flashier, unburdened by a past that asked questions or expected too much. In private, their relationship was transactional, built on shared ambition and mutual advantage. "Do you like it?" Belle whispered, flashing her ring at a group of influencers clustered near the dance floor. 3 carats, cushion cut. "Julian says it's just a symbol, but I say it's a promise." She drank it in, blissfully unaware of the target on her back. Meanwhile, Julian scanned the room with a predator's awareness. That's how he'd risen so fast. How he'd built an empire from the ruins of his father's mistakes. He liked to think he could control any narrative. "Did you hear how he left Evelyn? They say he timed the divorce so she'd get less in the settlement." A financier nodded. Across the room, Belle caught fragments of these conversations, but she dismissed them. "Smile for the press, darling," she purred. "Let's give them a show." But every now and then, a flash of insecurity crossed his face. A flicker of doubt that nothing, no amount of applause or attention, could quite erase. Their lives were built on glass, and both knew it. Underneath it all, a fear hummed. "You're trending everywhere," she whispered, showing Belle her phone. "Let them talk." Simone hesitated, sensing the undercurrent. "Are you sure you did?" "Of course." Julian picked whoever fit the moment, whoever helped him win. That was the lesson Belle hadn't learned yet. She thought the ring, the parties, the headlines meant she was safe. For all the glamour and success, part of him still seethed with resentment at Evelyn, at his father, at anyone who'd ever doubted him. She wasn't watching the hashtags or counting the eyes on her. Julian and Belle danced, smiled, posed for the world, convinced their story was a fairy tale. But even the best fairy tales have a reckoning, and the higher the glass tower, the further it is to fall. She had personally curated the guest list, chosen the cause, and greeted each donor with a warmth that made them feel not just important, but remembered. Her attention to detail and genuine kindness were the glue that held the city's philanthropic circles together. Julian and Belle had seized control of every aspect of the event. Belle, eager to prove her worth, appointed herself head of public relations. She dismissed Evelyn's trusted team and hired a new staff loyal only to her and Julian. The invitations once signed by Julian and Evelyn Vaughn now bore only Julian's name and Belle's calligraphic signature. The ink was still wet with arrogance. Evelyn knew this would happen. Of course, she'd seen it coming from the moment Belle moved in, her eyes alight with the thrill of conquest. But she didn't realize just how thorough they would be in their campaign to erase her. There was no mention of Evelyn's years of service, no reference to the nights she'd spent balancing the books or smoothing over ruffled egos. It was as if she'd never existed at all. Behind them, the city's most influential lined up to be seen, eager to bask in the reflected glow of new royalty. Crystal centerpieces, walls washed in violet light, tables set with gold-rimmed plates and handwritten place cards, each one checked twice by Belle herself. In the middle of the room, a massive display celebrated the future of the Vaughan Foundation. The future belonged to them. For a moment, Julian felt invincible. Belle took the stage, her voice bright and practiced. When Julian and I decided to take the foundation in a bold new direction, we knew we had to dream big. And look what we've built together. After her speech, Julian stepped up to the microphone. He thanked the donors, praised Belle, and spoke of moving forward. Change is never easy, but it's always necessary. It was a masterstroke of erasure, a nod to Evelyn that sounded like praise but felt like a shove out the door. The applause that followed was polite but cool. Among the guests, some exchanged uncomfortable glances, others whispered behind raised hands. Evelyn was gone, and she wasn't coming back. Backstage, Belle watched the reactions on a hidden monitor, her mouth set in a triumphant line. "She'll see this online," she muttered to her assistant. "She'll finally get it. This is our world now." Her years of work had been wiped clean, as if they'd never happened. The city watched as a woman's legacy vanished in a flicker of pixels. She didn't cry. Her role rewritten by those who saw her only as an inconvenience. She realized that this was the freedom she'd been too afraid to claim. For years, she'd worried about her reputation, about being liked, about not making waves. Now, with nothing left to lose, she felt her fear dissolve into resolve. If they wanted her erased, they would soon find out how dangerous a woman with no place left at the table could be. And for Julian and Belle, the real reckoning was just beginning. The days after the gala unfolded in slow motion, each hour dragging behind it a leaden weight. Her movements were automatic and silent. Every detail of the world seemed muted, dulled by a heartbreak so profound, she wondered if it would ever lift. She told herself she was prepared. She told herself it didn't matter anymore, that she had moved on. Evelyn spent hours on the couch, knees pulled to her chest, replaying memories she wished she could forget. She remembered the first time Julian had truly looked at her, back when he still believed in love. There had been warmth in his eyes, a promise she'd clung to in her darkest moments. Sometimes her mind would drift to Belle. But all she felt was a hollow ache. Belle was just another player in Julian's endless game. Someone who, like her, wanted desperately to belong, to be chosen, to be seen. But not in this one. The loneliness was the hardest part. For years, her life had been filled with noise and people. Fundraisers, committee meetings, phone calls at all hours. Even her closest friends, unsure of what to say, kept their distance. Most simply faded away, unwilling to risk Julian's wrath or Belle's scorn by staying loyal to the woman everyone now called the ex. She didn't want her parents to see what she had become. One night, after hours of staring at the ceiling, Evelyn stumbled to the kitchen. A pale ghost, hair mussed, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. For the first time, she allowed herself to cry, letting the grief and anger pour out until her chest ached and her throat burned. She'd become fluent in the language of compromise, always putting his needs ahead of her own. Now, left with nothing, she realized just how much of herself she'd lost along the way. She cleaned the apartment, made coffee, answered emails from distant acquaintances, but her mind kept circling back to the same question. Who was she if not Julian Vaughan's wife? Who was she if not the face of a foundation, the hostess of a world that no longer wanted her? Hesitating, Evelyn answered. "I'm so sorry. I just wanted you to know I never believed their version of the story. You made that foundation what it is." Evelyn swallowed, her voice trembling. "It just feels like I lost everything." "Listen to me," Simone said, her tone suddenly fierce. "You are more than Julian, more than any headline or gala or socialite. You built something out of nothing. You changed people's lives. Don't let them take that away from you." For the first time in days, Evelyn felt a flicker of hope. Small, but stubborn. Maybe she wasn't powerless. Maybe even now, she could reclaim something of herself. She didn't know what that looked like yet, but she knew she owed it to herself to try. She wrapped herself in a blanket, feeling the first stirrings of resolve in her chest. Why was her heart still beating, still aching for more? The days following her breakdown were the quietest of Evelyn's life. She'd always told herself it was just rainy day money, a phrase Julian had teased her about, calling it cute. Before she married him, before she became Evelyn Vaughn, she was Evelyn Harper, the only grandchild of industrialist Samuel Harper. He was a man whose quiet empire stretched from tech startups in Silicon Valley to shipping conglomerates in Singapore. Her grandfather had been a genius, but he hated the spotlight. And when he died, he left his fortune to Evelyn in a complex trust managed by lawyers who answered only to her. So, she hid it, choosing to build a life based on love and hard work instead. But now, staring at the papers, she realized she had been running from her own strength. And for what? To please a man who never really loved her. All this time, she'd been living as if she had nothing. In reality, she had everything she needed to rewrite the ending. No one questioned her authority. Most sounded relieved to hear from her, as if they'd been waiting for the day she'd reclaim her name. With every call, Evelyn felt her old self return. The ambitious college graduate who once believed she could change the world. The strategist who never flinched from a challenge. She reached out to the directors of the charities she'd worked with for years, offering silent funding and new connections. She didn't need headlines or credit. But her greatest move was yet to come. Alexander Pierce stepped out, dressed in a sharp navy suit, his silver hair glinting in the mist. She'd assumed he'd moved on. But now, as he climbed the stairs and knocked on her door, she realized how wrong she'd been. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice gentle. Evelyn nodded, stepping aside. He took in the boxes, the files, the blue velvet box. "You're working," he observed, a hint of a smile on his lips. Evelyn almost laughed. "I could be strong, or I could be loved. That's what men like Julian want women to believe." She looked at him, really looked at him. Alexander didn't want to control her. He wanted to see her succeed, to be her ally, not her master. "Why did you come?" she asked softly. "Because I heard about the gala. Because I know what it feels like to be erased." Inside were the details of a new business venture, a global charity initiative that would fund women-owned startups and provide scholarships for underprivileged girls around the world. He met her gaze. "Because you built an empire with nothing but grit and kindness. Because you survived what would have destroyed most people. And because the world is ready for women like you to lead." For the first time in months, Evelyn smiled. A real, honest smile that made her feel like herself again. "You'll need a team, and I have just the people in mind." The work was intense, but exhilarating. With each day, Evelyn felt her confidence return. She stopped reading the tabloids, stopped caring about Julian and Belle's latest antics. Instead, she poured her heart into something bigger, something that would outlast any scandal or betrayal. What would Julian do when he realized the woman he'd cast aside was no longer just surviving, but thriving? Gone was the woman who shrank in the corners of ballrooms, who bit her tongue for peace, who allowed herself to be diminished in the name of love. What she saw now was the version of herself her grandfather always believed in. A woman made for more than surviving other people's ambitions. The transformation was more than skin deep, but it began, in small part, with the surface. Her hair, once a gentle chestnut, was now a rich, assertive dark brown cut into a modern, effortless bob. She was done apologizing for taking up space. But the real metamorphosis happened in the choices she made and the risks she was now willing to take. Each morning began with strategic calls to her new board, mapping out their ambitious agenda. She wasn't content with being a silent partner or a donor behind the scenes. She spoke on panels about women's leadership, signed her name to initiatives supporting education and entrepreneurship, and graced magazine covers not as Julian Vaughn's ex-wife, but as Evelyn Harper, founder and CEO. She prioritized hiring other women who had been underestimated, who'd clawed their way through glass ceilings and glass walls. In staff meetings, her ideas were met not with skepticism or polite nods, but with genuine enthusiasm and respect. The first article came out in a major business magazine, The Rebirth of Evelyn Harper, From Socialite to CEO. Reporters marveled at how quickly she'd pivoted from heartbreak to headlines, how she'd taken her pain and spun it into a global movement. Some doubted her, others cheered her on, and a growing legion of Team Evelyn supporters began to drown out the critics. Evelyn didn't care about the noise. She knew there would always be doubters. That sometimes the princess saves herself. With her confidence blooming, Evelyn started to re-enter the social world she'd once avoided. Invitations poured in from organizations eager to claim her as a keynote speaker, a guest of honor, a living testament to the power of reinvention. She chose her appearances carefully, making her debut at the Women in Power Summit, a global event hosted in London, attended by world leaders and titans of industry. On the night of the summit, Evelyn stood backstage, nerves buzzing beneath her skin, but her resolve never wavering. For too long, we've been told our value lies in how quietly we suffer, how gracefully we disappear when we're no longer wanted. Her words reverberated through the hall, the applause thundering in her ears. For a moment, Evelyn thought of Julian and Belle, imagining them sitting somewhere in their perfect penthouse, watching her on a glowing screen. She hoped, for their sake, that they finally understood what she had always known deep down. Power isn't given, it's claimed. In the weeks that followed, Evelyn's star rose higher. Her name was everywhere. She was gracious but firm, never forgetting who stood by her in her darkest hours. But Evelyn never let success distract her from her mission. She made sure her foundation's first scholarship went to a girl from her hometown in Iowa. She listened. She remembered. She led. Still, the past was not quite finished with her. Board members whispered of unrest. Donors reconsidered their loyalty, and more than one headline hinted that the Vaughan Foundation's new era was already unraveling. Her time for revenge would come, but not tonight. It was the social event of the year, another Vaughan Foundation gala, but this one was different from all the rest. Would the new power couple, Julian and Belle, manage to pull off a successful night after months of quiet scandals? Would their once loyal donors return? She didn't plan to attend. She'd moved beyond that world, she told herself. You won't believe the chaos. Press everywhere. People keep asking where you are. Evelyn smiled, remembering the years she'd stood quietly on the sidelines, supporting a man who'd never truly seen her. Donors clustered in wary groups, their eyes flicking between Julian and Belle, who were doing their best to project confidence. A few guests recognized Evelyn instantly, their expressions shifting from surprise to respect. The press, sensing a story, pivoted their cameras as she crossed the threshold. Every step was calm, measured, powerful. Julian saw her before anyone else did. She walked directly to the table of VIP donors, many of whom she'd cultivated over years of hard work and real friendship. The foundation hasn't been the same. As she moved through the room, more and more guests broke from their conversations to approach her. By the time she reached the front of the ballroom, it was clear to everyone who the real center of gravity was. The main event of the evening was a panel on women's leadership in philanthropy. Evelyn had been listed in the program as an honored guest. Belle, determined to maintain control, insisted on moderating the discussion herself, hoping to outshine Evelyn once and for all. But when the panel began, it was clear that Belle was out of her depth. Her questions were shallow, her comments rehearsed, and the audience, used to Evelyn's intelligence and authenticity, grew restless. When Evelyn finally took the microphone, the room fell silent. The work that goes unseen, unpraised, and often unrewarded. The applause was thunderous. She shared personal stories, some painful, some triumphant, but never once stooped to bitterness. When she finished, the standing ovation lasted nearly a full minute. Julian, watching from the edge of the stage, felt the cold sting of defeat. Everything he'd built on spectacle and status was slipping through his fingers, replaced by something he could neither command nor control. After the panel, as guests mingled and the press jockeyed for interviews, Evelyn took her place beside Alexander Pierce, her business partner, mentor, and, some whispered, the real power behind her ascent. Together, they announced a groundbreaking partnership. Reporters clamored for comment, cameras flashing as Evelyn, poised and unflappable, fielded every question with grace. She credited her team, acknowledged her mentors, and with a quiet smile, thanked all those who believed in me, even when it wasn't easy. The headlines that followed were electric. Pierce and Harper announced game-changing merger. The city, the press, and even many of Julian's own former supporters had chosen sides. She had built something lasting. The world had seen her fall. Tonight, they watched her soar. 1 year later, the autumn air in Iowa was crisp and clean. Beside her, Alexander Pierce slipped his hand into hers, their fingers lacing together naturally. This was the first school built by the Harper Pierce Foundation, right here in the town where her dreams had first taken flight. Vaughn Empire collapses amidst fraud allegations. Her gaze fell upon a little girl on a swing set, pumping her legs to go higher and higher, her face alight with pure joy. It was her, all those years ago, making a vow to see the world. Evelyn leaned her head on his shoulder, a genuine, peaceful smile on her face. "No," she corrected gently, "look what we built." Her victory wasn't revenge. It was building a future brighter than any diamond, a love founded on respect, and a legacy that would help countless other girls learn to fly. Sometimes losing everything you thought you wanted is the only way to find everything you truly need. If her story inspired you, please show your support by hitting that like button, sharing this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribing to our channel for more stories of resilience and empowerment.